Give you a coffee mug, and I'll give it to you in just a second. And it's simply Jackson's quote that the Supreme Court is not final because it is infallible, but infallible because it's not final.
Because it is final.
It is final, yes. How did you find that after you read the quote, you finally write this wonderfully, critically acclaimed book? How did you get a sense of that?
Well, Jackson's quote, we are not final because we are infallible. We are infallible because we are final, is really one of my favorite quotes about the Supreme Court because it really captures the humanity of the institution. The institution is not flawless. The institution is not full of perfect people. It is full of people who are creatures of their times, who have flaws, who have attributes, who are complicated people. And what Jackson is saying is, look, we're not perfect, but somebody has to have the last word, and it just happens to be us.
In the audience tomorrow is likely to be Ed Meese.
Oh, is that right?
He comes
really?
to Chautauqua,
oh, really?
And when you least expect it, he'll sit. He's there. He doesn't wear his name tag around, and you use him in your book as sort of the launching off point. You get in your book, you sort of give a sense that he was somewhat of the during the Reagan administration, thinking through this whole idea of original intent. Would he be happy the way it looks today?
I think Edwin Meese would take tremendous pride in where the Supreme Court is today. And in particular, I think he would look at the gun control decision, District of Columbia versus Heller, with particular pride. Because not only did his side win, but the way the two sides argued with each other was on turf that Ed Meese basically created. Because what you had in that case was Antonin Scalia for the majority saying the Second Amendment does protect an individual right to bear arms, and look at what the framers had to say about it. And you had Justice Stevens for the dissenters saying, no, that's not what the framers believed. But they were all arguing about what the framers believed. They were all making originalist arguments. And I think that's the real sign of how much he's won.
As you started off, you mentioned this in your, maybe either in an interview or the book itself, and as you got into the book, there was a question to you about whether you could name the 5 lawyers you admired the most, and you were troubled with that, trying to answer that, and yet you were able to easily identify the 5 journalists. Now that you've concluded the book, you've had a chance to deal with law clerks, Supreme Court. Can you answer the question of the 5 lawyers you admire the most?
Well, I admire a lot of lawyers. You're making a reference to something I said about why I became a journalist.
That's right.
Is that I found that it was easier for me to identify journalists that I admire rather than lawyers. Now that I have been out in the world for some time, I think I have a broader perspective, and I know that there are a lot of lawyers, judges out there who I think are terrific and intelligent and admirable people. I just don't happen to want to be a lawyer, but that doesn't mean I don't admire them.
Let me give you some names of the people you mentioned in the book, and maybe your sense of the personality behind the person.
Sure.
If you go through, well, for example, Rehnquist, who was here. What was your sense of him having, now that you concluded the book?
Well, William Rehnquist was really great at the job of being Chief Justice of the United States. By that I mean the technical aspects of the job, running the Supreme Court, being responsible for the American judiciary as a whole. He was terrific. He really learned from, frankly, Warren Burger's negative example, who was not popular among his colleagues. And Rehnquist was truly beloved among his colleagues across the political spectrum. On the substance of his views, he was very conservative, and he didn't win as much as he'd hoped and as much as you might have expected him to hope. You might have expected him to win. But his victories may come on those issues after his death.
O'Connor.
Well, O'Connor, I think, is really one of the large figures in American history, clearly the most influential woman in American history, and right up there among men. I think she had a politician's instinct for where the American people were on the most contentious issues of the day. And that was really where she wanted to steer the court. She was a moderate by temperament, by inclination, by politics, and I think that is where she tried to keep the court.
Stevens.
Justice Stevens is, I have to say, even to me, a rather mysterious figure. Not much of a public figure at all, speaks in public rarely, not a conventional liberal, although now votes on the liberal side most of the time, but a quirky intellect, probably the finest lawyer on the court, but someone who has always just gone his own way and been very self-confident about it.
Scalia.
Scalia is a larger-than-life figure, bombastic, intentionally outrageous at times, and someone who, through many, many years on the court, I think sacrificed some influence for all of his pizzazz, sometimes alienating colleagues. I think the Heller decision on gun control is really the first very important majority opinion that Scalia has written, but I think is an illustration of how late in his career his influence is only rising.
Thomas.
Well, Thomas is the most complicated and tortured figure on the court. He is still deeply obsessed and hurt by the experience of his confirmation hearings. He is by far the most conservative member of the court, well to the right of Scalia, and someone who is a paradox because he is beloved among his colleagues, beloved by the people who work at the court, very gregarious, very fun, very relaxed, yet at the same time seething with anger.
Kennedy.
Well, certainly today, Anthony Kennedy is the most important Supreme Court justice because he holds in his hand the outcome of case after case. He is the swing justice like there's never been a swing justice. He is someone who is conservative on most issues, on civil rights, on voting rights, but on a couple of issues where, at least I think, he was deeply influenced by all his travels abroad, like the death penalty and the Geneva Conventions. There he tends to side with the liberals.
Ginsburg.
Ginsburg is one of the few lawyers to serve on the history of the Supreme Court who would be a major figure in American law if she'd never served on the court. Thurgood Marshall being the other prominent example, because she really created the field of sex discrimination law in the Supreme Court and argued many cases, most of them successfully. She has had the not so good fortune to be on the court at a time when her views have not been in ascendance. So she's had to write some dissenting opinions in cases that she cared about, but a very important lawyer in our history.
Breyer.
Breyer is the sunniest Supreme Court justice. He is, I think, the most approachable, the most relaxed. He's also someone who really believes in American government, in the institutions of our government. He really does, is very proud of the fact that he worked in the Congress. He's the only member of the Supreme Court now who spent any significant time working in Congress. He's the only Supreme Court justice who, without fail, goes to the State of the Union address each year because he feels that the Supreme Court is part of government and should show that to the public.
And the guy that often gets confused with Breyer or vice versa is Souter.
Well, David Souter, it is just an absolute miracle that this man is on the Supreme Court because he's so unlikely to be there. The court tends to get people who've been self-promoters, who have really tried hard to become prominent in the profession. And David Souter leads this very peculiar 19th century lifestyle, but in terms of pure intellectual firepower is probably second only to Stevens on that court in terms of his just understanding of the law, and he's just a peculiar individual, but a very, very good lawyer.
Roberts.
I think it sometimes seemed that John Roberts was genetically programmed to be Chief Justice of the United States. He is so perfect in the role. His charm, his intelligence, his grace as a public person, all of that is perfect for the role. He is also very, very conservative, and it will be interesting to see which part of those sides of his character become his legacy, because he wants to take the law in some very controversial directions, and we'll see if he has the votes to do it. Alito is somewhat like David Souter in his shyness, his unlikelihood, in how unlikely it is that he wound up on the Supreme Court, because he's not a self-promoter. He's not someone who has burned with ambition his whole life to be on the Supreme Court. Very competent, very intelligent, very experienced, and very conservative.
You've mentioned in your book that Rehnquist, as a clerk for Justice Jackson, felt that the liberal law clerks were slanting the work of the court to the left, and that was something he wrote. Is that so?
You know, I think the law clerks believe they have more I think the law clerks think they have more influence than they actually do. They are very helpful to the justices, but in terms of what we really care about, how the justices vote, which direction the law is going, that's all about the justices. It's not the law clerks. So I think that was true in Rehnquist's day as a law clerk, and it's true today.
Another person who will be in the audience tomorrow will be former Lieutenant Governor Stan Lundeen of New York State. He's a member of our board here, and was caught up in the President Clinton purported selection of, or hoped for selection of, Mario Cuomo. Can you give us a little bit of that?
Well, one of the strangest stories I tell in the Nine is of how Bill Clinton implored Mario Cuomo to accept his nomination to be on the Supreme Court, and Cuomo came up with various reasons to say no. The main one was the election of 1994 was coming, and he said, I can't give up the governorship because Stan Lundeen, my lieutenant governor, is not a strong enough politician on his own to win the race. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty bizarre reason to me to turn down an appointment to the Supreme Court, and it has, of course, the peculiar postscript that Cuomo stayed in office, ran in 1994, and was soundly defeated by George Pataki.
And the other part of the story is Lundeen was advised, hang on, ready to go, hurry up, it's going to happen. As you put in your book, I mean, there was just literal phone calls.
Cuomo, with his chronic indecision, seemed like he was taking the Supreme Court appointment, seemed like he was going to make Stan Lundeen governor, but ultimately he never did it.
This book ends in really June of 2007. If you had to write it at the end of June of 2008, what would be the addendum?
Well, the addendum would be that the court remains at this equipoise of mostly conservative, but with Anthony Kennedy swinging the court to the liberal direction in a couple of areas. And in the big cases of this last term, we saw Kennedy wielding all that influence. He sided with the liberals on whether we should execute child rapists. He sided with the liberals on the latest cases about the treatment of the detainees in Guantanamo Bay. But on the gun control case, he signed on to Scalia's opinion, and in most of the day-to-day cases, he is in the conservative direction. Everything depends on who wins the 2008 election in terms of the future of the court.
For the sake of conversation, if Barack Obama's the winner, who do you think would be the 2 or 3 potential Supreme Court nominees, given the fact that there are probably 3 likely, with Stevens and Ginsburg and Breyer, maybe?
No, Souter.
Souter, okay.
Yeah.
Who, do you have a sense?
I think whether McCain or Obama wins, I think we will see an end to the talent pool for potential justices being limited to federal appeals court judges. You know, the court that decided Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, not one of the justices had ever been a judge before. Chief Justice Warren was governor of California. Justice Jackson, of course, here in Jamestown, had been Attorney General and served in the Roosevelt administration. It will be a good thing for either McCain or Obama to widen the talent pool. For the Democrats, maybe Janet Napolitano, the governor of Arizona. For the Republicans, maybe Chris Cox, head of the SEC, former congressman. You know, Sandra O'Connor added a lot to the court because she'd been an elected official, and I think that is a very good thing for the court.
Being such a well-known author, columnist, now very much a television personality, what's your biggest kick?
You know, I am greedy. I like them all. I think in terms of what means the most to me, it's the books I write. The 9 is the thing I'm proudest of in my career. But I love working for CNN. I love working for The New Yorker, and hope I can continue.
The Brethren comes out in 1979. You read it. Subsequently learned that Potter Stewart was sort of very much part of that information gathering. Did you suspect that many years later the sources would be available so that you could do such a detailed analysis?
I sure had no idea when I read it the first time. When I read it the first time, I didn't even know I was going to be a journalist. I thought I would be more likely to be a lawyer. So I was still, you know, a teenager when I read that book. So I was not thinking that far down the line. But I remember loving the book, and I reread it when I started work on the 9, and I loved it again.
Did you get a sense from those that you talked to that there was sort of a willingness, glad that somebody's asking the right questions? Not that they were going to write a book, but or did you get sort of semi-pushback and then, all right, we'll do it?
I did not get many, oh, come on down, I'd love to spill all my secrets to you. This reporting was hard.
Yeah.
The sources were mostly reluctant, whether they were justices or law clerks. So I think there has been some generational turnover at the court, that there are people there who recognize that it's important for them to tell the public what they do, that they have to speak to the court in something other than their opinions.
As gratifying as this is there a follow-up to this on this subject?
I don't know if there's a book follow-up. Certainly there are more articles to be written about the Supreme Court. I don't know.
Will you do it?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I will continue covering the court for The New Yorker and CNN. Whether I will write another book about the Supreme Court, fortunately, I think I have a few years to think that over. Not anytime soon.
What's next?
I don't have a book in mind. I will certainly write another book. Fortunately, the world is a complicated and bizarre enough place that it supplies me with book topics just through my work. But I don't know. And other than that, I'm covering the 2008 campaign, legal developments, and we'll see what happens.
And as part of that, you did a superb job on the YouTube debate. What was that like? You walk in there and there's lights, camera, action,
Yeah, well,
and it was unique.
Yeah, the YouTube debate was great. I think that's going to be one of the real legacies of the 2008 campaign, that the public has to have a voice in the election process and the growth of the web and people's process of websites, email, they just want a more direct connection to the process, and I think the YouTube debate was a good start to that.
I should ask the question since we're in the Robert Jackson Center. Is there a sense of Robert Jackson with Jeff Toobin?
Oh, absolutely. I think, I mean, I'm going to talk about this some tomorrow, but I mean, my immediate association with Robert Jackson is that he was the best writer ever to be on the Supreme Court. Now, put aside the substance of his views, which was interesting, put aside the remarkable life that he led, just as a writer, as a stylist, as a creator of sentences, there was no one better on the court. And that's what I think of him above all.
Similarly, was there any sense of that from your sources as you were preparing for this, and there some of these folks, their ability to write, was that a sense of jurisprudence? Or
well, I think one of the things the court has lost in recent years, because the opinions are so long and bureaucratic, is the voice of the individual justice. That when the days when the justices did most of their own first drafts, you often had a sense of the individual through their writing. It is more homogenized now, and I think that's a loss at the court. And Jackson is the classic example of a justice who, even though he did not serve that long on the court, made a historical reputation for himself, not just for the quality of his thought, but the quality of his sentences.
Jeff Toobin, thank you very much.
Great to be here.